As you recall, that's just a roofing nail that I filed a flat halfway through. Ta-da! Gentlemen, welcome back to the shop and another edition of Manly Man Skills. It's been a long time a-coming, I know. And here in our humble shop, we get together for a laugh and share that laugh on Al Gore's information superhighway. And today's video idea comes to us via the comments. Now, normally when people suggest I do something for a video, I politely as possible, tell them to go fuck their hat. However, in this case, a certain Richard Head done tickled me right in the flattery center. So, what I'm going to do is teach I'm going to show you young fellas what for is the poking sticks, what for embiggening holes. Now, according to the patron saint of, Norm Abrams, there is no more safety important rule than to wear these, your safety McGlarses. Right, now that we've fulfilled our contractual obligation to the nanny state, essentially what I'm telling you is grow some personal accountability and use your fucking head. He has a valid point. It's clearly not his first rodeo on account of if you do get some schmoo in your eye, you got to put these on, what for avoiding the paperwork, imperial entanglements and whatnot. Now here's a little tip for the stools on the tools. Just the tip, mind, and only for a minute. If and you're actually working and it's hot, you're going to fog up, right? So you put these around your neck or wherever so you can actually get your work done, as long as it's not too dangerous. There's not schmoo flying at your face like last Saturday night. Then if a clipboard warrior does catch you, you just got to have a ready answer, partner. I was cleaning them. I just took them off to clean them. I'm putting them back on. Fuck off. It is a little subtle, but they generally get the hint. First out of the gate, we have the percussive drill bit. This is mainly here just for making a compelling thumbnail with a sidebar of asinine clickbait. You won't believe what he does with this next. This is actually a percussive rock drill bit, and it's a big one. This is a reamer bit, so here's a little stake on one, and this is a ballistic button. These are tungsten tar glide, the paragon of materials, which brings us into the hierarchy of materials. First are the easiest to drill, wood and plastique. This happens to be nilotrol, which is nylon impregnated with molybdenum disulfide. It's a bearing material. Look at that. That's a thing of beauty. This, however, is a laminated dead tree carcass. Sick! As much as it sickens me to say, it's even legal now in Missouri, so who am I to judge? And what this is a dead tree carcass that was killed specifically. This was a living organism that was killed specifically so that some sick fuck could either manually or electrically manipulate its carcass. Now I know some of us here on YouTube, the community that we've made, got our knickers in a knot. Come that way right from the factory. And of course me poking the wood pixies with a stick.
He didn't buy anything that wasn't the best tool. He didn't make anything that wasn't the best tool. So there was a real key for that, and yet you can lift this up, and some of the tools are a little bit quirky about the way they stay or don't stay in place, and that you look underneath and there's another.
Now I love polishing my tool as much as the next guy, but you don't see me going all Asian lady driver routine with the visor and the white gloves. Now the astute amongst us will note that it is very Freudian that some guys are fixated on this morbid, they have a morbid fascination with wood. Again, I don't judge, but you might want to just move up the hierarchy a little bit further. Dip your tip in a different pond, as it were. Now the selection of material for your project dictates the selection of drill bit. Normally these are called twist drills, not bits. It's frowned upon by those in the professional Sith Bulleth to call these bits, but they are bits of steel, M2 steel to be exact. Okay, this is a spade bit, and these are for drilling strictly soft materials like wood. Same thing, Forstner bit, making bigger holes in wood. These are quite expensive. They make a nicer hole, unless what I've seen is people, especially here on YouTube, drilling holes like this, they're weeble wobbling around. Basically, that just embiggens the hole and makes an uglier breakthrough. But there's, you know, as I said previous, and I will say again, there's no accounting for some tastes. Now, this is a wood boring bit, and you can see it's made for a bit and brace, so it's pretty clear I haven't used it in a long time because I don't have a brace, which is a manual machine. Essentially, this screws itself into the wood, so you don't need any feed pressure. It just gives her. Say you're an electrician or a plumber on a residential job, and you gotta drill holes through the tubifers. What for pulling your wire through? But this will do the job, make an uglier stump fence hole, but it'll get her done nice and quick. So you can use twist drills for wood. Normally they come in indexes up to 1/2 inch, 13 millimeters for you continental types. And they do a fine job with wood. When you get into the bigger sizes, of course, the bigger size twist drills, your machine needs more torque. So you can go with a spade bit or a Forstner bit, or even, now these are just from the Princess Auto Power Fister. Of course, they're bimetal blades, just cheapo Chinese stuff. I keep a crappy set around, and I do have a good set of the Starretts, which I very likely loaned out and lost track of because I can't find it, or it's at the very bottom of the Empire of Dirt. One thing to note is when you're drilling deep holes with this, where you can only do 1 inch, but you need to evacuate the cuttings. So you'll see guys just a giving her, hey, it's not drilling, and it'll start to smoke, yada yada yada. You got to get rid of the cuttings. There's only so much room in that gullet. The gullet of that's the belly of the tooth. There's only so much room in there for chewed up wood carcass. So you need to come up and sort of blow that out and then come back down. There's other ones that have carbide tipped, and you'll notice they drill way faster, and that's their claim to fame, but they'll have a huge cutout here. That's just for chip evacuation. That actually lets the material get out. So remember, when you're using these, you want to peck, 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 because you want to get rid of, you want to evacuate those chips. Otherwise, well, you'll evacuate them either way, but they'll be in smoke form. And because wood is so low on the hierarchy of materials, you do not need good quality twist drills to drill this material. So any old Chinesium, the same thing will happen, however, I should mention. You need to peck because you need to evacuate the chips. They pack in there real good, and then it doesn't drill anymore because it cannot cut a chip. It's got nowhere to evacuate it to. Okay, plastics. Twist drills work. Forstner bits, I don't know how well they work. Twist drills, they tend to bite, and if you look at this, it's threaded. It's just like a screw. So this will thread itself in, especially in real thin materials. It'll thread itself in, and you'll get the helicopter effect. That's the official term, is the workpiece comes right up and helicopters around, killing all in its path. So what you need to do is you take yourself a little stone and you brass off the edge, which basically means you purposely dull the blade so that it doesn't grab. One rung up the ladder is ferrous, or rather non-ferrous metal. Some no ferrous from the chemical element ferrumdium, which is of course iron, fer in Francais. That means iron, ferrous. So these are non-ferrous. Excuse me. My rum and coke is broken. Here the dull silvery looking metal is aluminium. This is 6061 extruded, kind of the catch-all grade. It's not the best at anything, but it's good at pretty much everything. Good weldability. So this is what you'll see in extruded section. Now it has a dull sheen because it's actually oxidized, and the reason aluminium doesn't doesn't corrode is because that oxide layer is impermeable to more oxygen. So once it oxidizes, and it happens very quickly, the raw aluminum picks up oxygen out of the air, it actually creates its own film. And that is why aluminum doesn't rust. This is phosphor bronze. It looks like brass, which is, of course, from elementary school metallurgy, is copper and zinc. This is actually phosphor bronze. So that's copper and not zinc, but tin with some phosphor in there. It makes for a good bearing material because of the low coefficient of friction. Essentially, the phosphor in the fluid state, when you pour this, makes it solidify so that the grain boundaries are smaller, and that does something to the stiffness as well as lowering the coefficient of friction. As soon as you see sort of a goldy or a weird colored metal, that should get your spider sense just a tingling on account of it being super gummy. So this will grab your drill bit and fuck right off. So again, you can use any kind of cesium grade Chinesium drill bit, but be sure and brass it off. And that just means that we dull the cutting edge. And you can also cut these with bimetal hole saws. You're not going to get a very nice hole finish and there'll be lots of chatter, but it will cut. Maybe a little better option if you're just going through thin cross section is some of these ultra cutters. Essentially, it's just a sharper and a bigger gullet. So these are Greenlee. Elk chickens use these for drilling holes in enclosures. They work good for thin section. Now we get into more of the metalworking side. We can also use these slugging bits. These are rotor broaches, annular cutters, they're also called. Essentially, the twist drill, it has to cut all the material out of the hole. It has to cut every single little bit of it. But the rotor broach, it only cuts the periphery, so it leaves a slug. Oh, your machine doesn't need nearly as much torque. Now we're getting into the meat of her. Brass is like a gooey cheese, like a brie, and aluminium is maybe a little stiffer, like a Gouda. But we're getting into steel, which is like a cheddar, and then tool steel, this is annealed, so this would be more like Parmesan Reggiano type deal. And then we get into actual hardened steel, and this is as hard as a coffin nail, so this is manganese, high wearing and hardened tool steel. Carrying on with the cheese analogy, this is like a diamond. So getting into mild steel, which is not high carbon, it's low carbon, it's iron with a little bit of carbon in it, but not that much. Of course, cast iron has tons and tons of carbon, but it's not hard because the carbon precipitates out as it solidifies, and it actually creates, like when you drill iron, cast iron, you'll actually see the carbon coming out of it. All that gray looking stuff, it's little nodules of carbon, and it makes a graphite, it's a really good lubricant. So when you're drilling cast iron, you don't need any kind of lubrication. Now, mild steel, you don't really need lubrication. You can use it to save your drill bits, but mainly if you're using a cutting oil, you're basically just making smoke. That's all you're doing. So if you only got a couple of holes to drill in steel, you can use Chinesium grade drill bits. You'll do just fine. But if you're actually making nice holes and you don't want to have too many headaches, you got to drill a lot of holes, you have to use good quality drill bits. Now some guys are going to disagree with me on that, but I myself, I enjoy my time in the shop. I don't like a friggin' a fussing and a dicking around. I just like to drill my hole and get out. So I highly recommend you get yourself a decent set of drill bits. These are Presto Metrique for you continental types. Now, if you are into Metrique and you don't do any inch standard, you guys are lucky. You only need one drill bit index, just the 13 to 1. But if you're like me in America's Hat or you're in America, you need 3 sets of drill bits. So you need the inch fractional, 64ths by up to ½ inch, so starting at 1/16. You need the letter index, That's for tapping holes, and these are letter sizes. And then you also need the number sizes, which are smaller. And these are mainly for machine screws, so small threaded fasteners. When you get into the smaller ones, your chuck will not hold those small ones properly. So you got to get yourself a set of pin vices. Now I got these from Ghastly Tools there down in Washington, and I think they were the whole set for 50 cents or something. And unfortunately you get what you paid for. So I bought the first set and it wasn't worth a pinch of, it wasn't worth shit. So I bought the second set. Lo and behold, it wasn't worth shit either. And then my wife done got me this for, I asked for it for Christmas. And a holy doodle, a beauty, a bonnie, and a joy forever. These things work like a trained toilet. And what it is you're able to put the small, it's a vise, 4 round things. You're able to put the small, tiny little drill bit in there, and then clamp it down in the collet, and then you put this end into your drill chuck. Or of course, if you're that small, you can hand drill actually. But yeah, I'm not averse to a little hand work myself, but I prefer not to do it while you guys are watching. I also like the Walters. The cleat lines are good. You know, any kind of name brand, if you can get them made in the USA, all the better, or England. I mean, I bought these specifically because they were built in England, Sheffield, England, with Presto. Son of a diddly though. The index came from China and I can't friggin' close it. Shame. So now we'll get into the type of twist drill. Now, these are all name brand. I've had good luck with the Norseman. They're pricey, but they're worth it. One thing I wish these ones had was the 3, where can I, like this, the ground 3 edges that the Jacobs chuck engages, because these are actually really soft. They're soft down here and hard up here, so you'll see they'll, if it spins in the chuck, it gets a little galled section that you got to grind off. So you're better off, if you can, find the ones with the 3 ground flats on there, and don't do it yourself because you'll get a speed wobble in there. If it doesn't come with it, don't put it in there. But these are really good bits, sharp. I mean, you feel them, they're super sharp. There's a bit of a gold kind of nitride coating on there. You don't need the nitride coating for hand drilling or small. All it does, it reduces the friction and reduces the hot chip welding to the flutes. We don't really worry about that because as a home gamer, your drill bits are, you're not, if you're drilling steel and stuff, they're not gonna go dull on you. You're gonna chowder the fuck out of the edge. You're gonna break the edge is what's gonna happen. So don't worry about, you know, this chip welding and all that kind of crap. Just use the friggin' thing. So we can see this is just a black oxide coating here. That's all you need. And here's a natural, just what would they call that? A polished finish. But these are left-hand flutes. So these are fun for dicking around. You tell your buddy to go drill a hole, and they actually have to be spun in reverse. And what these are good for is removing bolts, broken bolts. So here we get into the meat of her anyway. This is a split point. And this is a regular point, a chisel point. I'm going to show you the difference. In the middle there, in the web, there is essentially what looks to be a cold chisel. You see that edge there? So that doesn't cut anything. It actually needs to be forced down and into the metal, and it just moves the metal out of the way to where the flutes can get at it and actually cut it off. So that is why with this type of drill bit, you want to have a pilot hole. And what size pilot? Well, it needs to be big enough to cut that chisel. So it needs to be at least as big as this chisel. A little bit bigger is okay. You want, like in the smaller size drill bit, say you're going 3/8 or 1/4 inch, and you want a pilot, you still don't want to break the pilot. So choose a big enough pilot so that you can put a little bit of force on it and it's not gonna go all daddy wampus on you and break. Is that clear? So you probably not. Clear as mud, right? So you need a pilot that is bigger than that chisel, but not too big, because you still want this drill bit to work. Like if you're taking a final pass and you're only cutting a couple thou or half a millimeter off, you're gonna break this chisel edge and it's gonna self-feed. So you gotta make sure that the pilot is big enough so that goes through, that chisel end goes through, but not too big. And this style, if you spend an hour or two and practice, you can easily sharpen these on just about anything. I've done it on a wet noodle. Now this style is a split point. Yoo-hoo! Focus, you fuck. And frame, for fuck's sakes. Frame, you fuck. There we go. Okay, so they've gone in and cut the flutes. And you can see here, there we go. And they've gone and cut the cutting edge, but then they've come back here on the back side of the flute and cut a grind down. So what that does is it eliminates the chisel middle part. So now this cuts the whole length of the flute. There's no chisel tip there that needs to be jammed in and driven through the steel. This actually cuts along the whole length. So these are easier for hand drilling, and you do not need a pilot with these unless you're, some sort of special material and you got to be spot on. Then again though, if you got to be spot on, you're not going to be drilling them, you're going to be boring it or drilling and then reaming. So these drill bits are more expensive and they're easier to drill with, but they're harder to sharpen. When I sharpen these, I just turn these into the chisel tips because I haven't figured out how to get that nice yet. Okay, now specialty drill bits. So here we have a nice chunk of H13 tool steel. This is the kind of steel that they use for plastic mold making and aluminum dies for die casting enclosures and this sort of thing. H13 tool steel is a hot work tool steel. Now if you heat this up and then quench it in air or oil, it gets hard. It gets real hard. There's different nomenclatures for tool steels, and there's there's thousands of grades for specific. Steel is an amazing material, and there are literally thousands of different grades for specific applications. We're just talking about tool steels in general, but if they're hardened, you're going to have a hell of a time drilling them. Now, if they're hardened, the only thing that's going to cut them is diamond or carbide. Here we have a Sikko, probably from Sweden, tungsten carbide. So this is Tungsten tongue slide, and it's a powdered, it's carbide, so it's tungsten and carbide together, and then they take powders of different materials, say nickel or boron or whatever the application is. Like this is not a high impact application, so this would be nickel sintered, and they put it in a mold this shape, squeeze it together, and then they cook it, and the grains grow together. Well, son of a diddly, it's hard as a coffin nail and also very brittle. But you can see this one is a machinist one specifically for machine tools, and it's got through coolant holes, right? So it's got holes all the way through the flutes to get coolant to blast in there, and this will drill hardened steels because it's carbide. It's super, super hard. But you need to have you wouldn't use this in a hand drill because you'd be weeble wobbling around and you'd break the edge because it's so brittle. You would have to use this in a very rigid machine, big tons and tons of iron spinning super fast and blasting coolant at the thing. Now this is a high-speed steel centering bit. This is for a lathe where the workpiece is spinning and this is stationary, and this centers in the center, in the middle of the workpiece, how it's spinning. Now this also comes in handy just for spotting. If you just want a little dimple to get you started, this will help you out because it's very, very rigid. It doesn't walk around on you. You see how thick that is? and the flutes aren't all the way through, so it's just for making a little dimple. Now here is something that you might want to keep in your toolbox just for getting through rough spots. This is a solid carbide, a stub length drill. So it's stub length so that it's rigid and doesn't move around too much. But if you look at some of these are just straight, there's no flutes at all. But essentially this is for drilling through hard stuff. Say you've got a grade 8 bolt that you've heated and welded to and all sorts of stuff like that, or cutting through a weld, something like that. This is going to actually touch that. Now these are, because they're carbide, they're very, very delicate, I'll say. They're very delicate, very hard, but very delicate, like a diamond. You know, a diamond will cut glass, but you hit it with a hammer and guess what? She's going to shatter. So, same thing. And these specialty drill bits are big bucks. Like this little carbide drill bit's probably 120 bucks. This little guy, 30 bucks. One step I got to tell you about that you need in metals that you don't need in wood or plastic is you need to spot where you want your drill bit to drill the hole. So for instance, in wood there's also those I believe it's brad tip, where the cutting edges actually have they got a little crown on here, and then they got a little tit in there that'll fit right on your pencil mark and go right where you need it. Well, these things, twist drills, because they're a chisel point, they're not actually cutting when you first put them in. You need to push that material out of the way. And that means as you're pushing, this thing wants to fuck right off on you. So what you got to do if you want any kind of accurate hole is center punch it. And I got two things to use here. I got the Big Bertha here if I want a big fat center punch. And that will just sit in there and keep the drill bit from walking. And then I got an automatic center punch which I really like. This was a treat. It's a Starrett. Of course, again, beauty, Bonnie, joy forever. I'll have this the rest of my life or until I lose it. And all you do, it's one-handed. You locate it and then give her a little. And that's that. Then if you want to embiggen that, you can just do one of these. Okay, if you center punch in the wrong spot, or you center punch and your drill is still walking, maybe you didn't locate your piece well enough or whatever, or the table on the drill press moved or whatever, and it's walking over to one side, what you can do, whichever direction it's walking, whichever direction you want to bring it back to, you center punch over on that side of the hole. So you put another center punch in there, and that'll bring that drill bit back in line. You might have to do that 3-4 times to get it to where you walked back to where you need it, and that hole will be a little wallered out where you first started, but you can recover a hole that's fucked off on you. Now, just briefly, drilling stone, what you need is a proper chuck. Yeah, that's a shitty chuck, but these are brand new. Okay, what the drill bit consists of is high-speed steel shank and carbide insert here. That's just a spade. You can see here, there's a cross. So for drilling concrete, masonry is one thing, you know, like cinder blocks is no big deal. You can drill that with your hammer drill, your DeWalt hammer drill. All that's doing, it's not actually hammering, it's spinning, and then there's teeth on the back of the chuck or the gear train, and it's ramping up this tooth and then falling back down. So there's no real impact, it's more of a vibration, but you can cut certain things. However, you'll run into trouble if you're trying to put holes in concrete. As soon as you hit a chunk of pea gravel, that drill bit's gonna fuck off, or it won't even drill through it because there's not enough impact energy to break that stone up. What you really need, if you're gonna drill accurate holes in stone, is a proper hammer drill, and you can rent these for way cheaper than the headache you're gonna get by trying to drill with a hammer drill. So these are a rotary hammer essentially, and they have a special kind of chuck here. That's an SDS chuck. You can see there's 2 detent balls that hold that. That's a Hilti, so high quality. The gauge on this is worn out, so it's a 1/2-inch drill, but it's not drilling 1/2-inch holes. So yeah, you got to watch that this spade bit isn't totally worn out, because you'll never get your anchor in or whatever you need to. What else? Oh yeah, when you're mechanically cutting that, normally when you're drilling rock like these guys, you blast the cuttings out with air and water mist, keep you from getting silicosis, and then all the cuttings come back through the hole in mucky water air format, and it scours out here. But anyway, you can see there's gouges there to allow that out. There's no chip clearance in this type. There's no positive chip clearance because there's no air, no water blasting through there. So it just relies on the screw, the Archimedes screw principle, to get rid of that dust. Okay, one of the hardest things to do as a beginner is to take apart and make something bolt up to it. And now what ends up happening normally is you got to embiggen the hole, bigger drill bit, or you wallow it out or slot it or whatever. Here's a trick for you, okay? What you can do is take a rubbing, like so. Just, see? Dirty hands. They're not just for canapé parties. So there you have a perfect template in order to go and knock the holes in there. And this is a transfer punch set, and they invariably end up like this, invariably, but what they are different sized transfer punches, basically long shafts with a little hardened nipple on there. And here's what you can do. So you put this up against whatever you want to transfer to. Oh, that's not going to work. Never mind. Keep magnets around because they're so fucking handy. You jam that in there, and then here's a magnet out of a hard drive. Jam that in there, just to keep this sort of half-ass located. And then give that a little tap. You don't want to whack this. You just give it a tap to mark it. And then give it a tap to mark it. And then you come in. Then you come in with your proper, yoo-hoo, your proper center punch here, and give her a, give her a proper whack. You get the idea. Okay, cutting fluid. This is high, very high sulfur. So it essentially makes lots of smoke. That's mainly what it does when you're hand drilling. It's optional, and there's going to be guys that have graduated from grade 9 shop class that comment, you got it, you're doing everything wrong, your feeds and speeds are... Listen, drill bits are cheap, man. They build them in factories every day, and they sell even more of them in stores. Not a big deal. Your time is priceless. So I find it really is a Linus blanket. It's a safety, it's a security blanket, because if you're drilling properly, nice feed, and too slow on the rotation is worse than too fast, I would say, because you got the 200-pound gorilla on the tool there, just pushing as hard as he can, and he's going slow, and then all of a sudden, ping, breaks a flute. That happens all the time. You come in nice and fast, you drill your hole, medium pressure at a medium pace. Now after you've drilled, if you're tapping the hole, you got to save yourself some headache. Some high sulfur cutting compound, even grease or something, something other than spitting a prayer. But for drilling, I found it makes no difference that you're not wearing the drill bit out, you're chowdering the edge, and if the chips are getting evacuated properly, there's no problem. It's only when you start to heat up because you hit a hard spot and the drill, it really doesn't do much of anything other than make smoke. If you ever find yourself in a diddly of a pickle, remember the hierarchy of materials. Steel, Beats wood. We're just going to file a flat halfway through this nail. You could do that on a rock too. Cheddar!